Welcome to the Simply Wild podcast, where we remember the wild within us. I am your host, Sadie Jane, and we are on, quite frankly, I don't remember which part. Part 5? Part 6? I'm sorry I don't remember that. But I feel like we're getting into like a really fun part. At least for me, it's a fun part. It also has some sad parts. So I guess before I begin, I will add a little trigger warning that I'm going to be talking about sexual assault on this podcast episode. But we are talking about plant medicine. And a reminder, the plant medicine can literally be anything from lavender and chamomile to hallucinogens, right? And if you remember the last episode, I talked about my first ayahuasca experience. And in that experience, I learned that nothing is outside of myself. Okay, that's great, Sadie. That's great. But where do we go from here? So I don't know if I mentioned this, but in my very first ceremony, there was a very profound moment where I remember thinking, I have to get this to my community somehow. In an ethical way, I have to be able to explain and share this with my community. And I didn't know it then. I don't think I knew it then, but because of that knowing, because of that calling, because of the feeling that I felt in my soul, I knew I was about to embark in a journey, a very deep journey of understanding or getting to know or really learning from these plant allies, from these plant teachers. And there's so much to say, but I'm going to try to continue on this linear path of my story. So I don't find it any kind of coincidence that I find plant medicine around the same time that the revolution of unlearning, relearning a lot of, inherent racism in America. This all happened when the death of George Floyd came out, and when the realization that that there was a lot of systemic racism happening in the world. And I find it really powerful that I was able to open and unlock this new opportunity of learning because of the indigenous colonies, the indigenous people that have allowed for this medicine to carry on, right? And so because of that, there was a lot of unlearning that I was doing. There was a lot of realizations of privileges. There was a lot of opportunities for me to step back and learn. And I'm really grateful for that because of that, I believe, and I'm continuing to do so, and I'm continuing to unlearn, and I'm continuing to educate myself. But I believe that it was a gift from God, truly, that I was able to be really conscious. And I'd like to believe that I was going to do this anyway, but who knows? Because you just don't know what you don't know. But because of that, I feel like there was an opportunity really for me to understand the sensitivity and the respect and the ethical grounds as to not just the respect of the medicine, but also the respect of where it's coming from, and also the respect of learning from a lineage that is ethical. And I also believe that I got really lucky, and I'm really grateful for this. And I think my intuition guided me through this, but I was able to enter into the plant medicine community from an ethical lineage that I'm really, really grateful for, because little did I know that my next step would be to essentially become an apprentice of such to this plant medicine, specifically grandmother ayahuasca. I just had this desire and this knowing that for me, it was something that I wanted to learn a lot from. Never hold the space, never serve. I don't think it's in my cards. I don't think it's in my path, but it's definitely in my path to bring this opportunity to people in an ethical way. So with that being said, I came back, and at that point in my journey, I didn't understand the power of integration. I didn't understand what that meant. And now I'm realizing, and it's such an essential part of the medicine experience. I believe integration is just as important, if not more important, than the ceremony. Because what happens, there's so many different opinions and thoughts about plant medicine. But what's beautiful is that we live in the 3D experience. We live on Earth, right? We live in this 3D realm. And what's really rad about plant medicine is it collapses time and collapses dimension so that we can go to the 5D to understand, to heal, to awaken. What I've noticed now that I've been in the community for a while is that people have a tendency, and they have tendencies of doing this regardless of whether it's with plant medicine or any other addiction, to disassociate. So it's really easy to get caught up in, I want to just stay in the 5D. The 5D essentially, for like the short description, is anything outside of this realm, right? And with the ability of hallucinogens have this incredible ability. Wow. I'm so sorry. I hope that I'm explaining this correctly. I don't know why I'm like stepping over my words, but it'll start flowing, I promise. The ability of 5D, of being into the 5D, is that you see things from a bird's eye view. You see things with more perspective. And I think one of the hardest things in this 3D life is to understand why things have happened, why things are happening, why we're here. And because of the lessons that you learn in the 5D, and because of how rad it is to see things from bird's eye view, it can become, I think, very addicting for people to go there. Just like it's addicting for people to be on their phones, just like it's addicting for people to shop, just like it's addicting for people for sex or drugs or alcohol, whatever it is, right? So it's something that I think it's a bad rap. And I actually have had some hate comments before as I've slowly begun to open up. Now, I have never in its entirety talked about plant medicine. I've waited for a handful of years because I wasn't ready. A lot of these experiences are very, very sacred to me. And because of that, I was not ready for me to expose or share the sacredness. One, because it felt too sacred, and two, because I don't think I felt like I understood or had a testimony of my own understanding of it enough to be okay with the hate that it was getting. I've had people say, oh, this is just your excuse to get high. This is just your excuse to disassociate, which in some people's experiences, it could be true. First of all, it's not for me to judge. And I actually don't care how you live your life as long as you're literally a good human. But for me, I don't care what people say because it's been such a prophetic change. It's been such a prophetic tool for me to use. And I say all that with a caveat of there's so much to learn from the 5D. And yet, if you can't integrate, if you can't bring back the tools that you have learned through these experiences, through these ceremonies, to your everyday life, to the point where you are wanting more so to be here, to be in the 3D rather than in the 5D, or rather than chasing the next ceremony or chasing the next thing, what's the point? Like, the point is to be here. And I say that, and I also will say I've sat with grandmother now 24 times. To some it is crazy, and to some it's not a lot, right? For me, there was so many reasons why I have sat and why I continue to sit. Now, I'll also say right now I don't really feel the call, but I'm really grateful it's available for me because I see it as therapy. It would be like going to a therapist once and saying you don't have to go to therapy ever again, or doing one thing once thinking that it'll heal you forever. We know that we live in a in a society full of polarity. The 3D experience is full of a very wide range of emotions, right? We're supposed to feel it all. So it's funny, when I began my spiritual journey, I genuinely was trying to find the golden egg, the golden understanding, the golden teaching to help me completely resolve and dissolve all of my depression, all my anxiety, all my problems. Little did I know, silly Sadie, ignorant Sadie, didn't understand that that wasn't even possible, nor do I actually want that to be possible, because growth comes from discomfort. Growth comes from having struggles. Growth comes from trials. And I am really grateful that I have now found a really healthy relationship with plant medicine to where I don't need it. I don't need it. But it's something that I will always, I think always, continue to commune with in a way, because it helps me really understand. It's my therapy. It's a way that it helps me, it does help me reflect. It does help me understand. It does help me integrate. It does help me see things from a bird's eye view. So some people come and sit with grandmother once, and that's the only time that they ever do it. Some people feel called to the medicine and the frequency. The cool thing about medicine is that, first of all, I really believe that we already have all of these frequencies within us. So if your medicine that you're experiencing or you're feeling or you're wanting to commune with, if it's not ultimately teaching you that you are the medicine, maybe you can reconsider, or maybe you can think, why do I need this? Why am I searching for something outside of myself? Because I have learned time and time again, one of the biggest lessons I've learned from grandmother, ayahuasca, is that one, obviously, the first teaching that I learned from my first experience, nothing's outside of myself. And two, that I am the medicine. She's just helping me remember. And three, this is one of the biggest ones. Nothing has taught me more, I don't think, about sovereignty than plant medicine. Because what happens is, not every ceremony, but depending on my intention, I am consistently met with a new edge of how I can better understand my own sovereignty. So some people feel like maybe medicine takes them to this state or this altered state where they don't have control. If anything, it has taught me these different states, these different intensities, these different frequencies have helped me remember, have been lessons for me to come back to my own sovereignty, to my own power. Nothing can take that away from me. Which is actually a really good segue into the next part of my story. Okay, which is a perfect segue into my next portion of my life, and understanding my sovereignty and understanding my accountability and understanding, what does this mean for me? Where is this next part of my story? Where is this next part of my journey? And I guess before I even go there, I want to really emphasize this concept that plant medicine has a way of opening doors that have been closed. Plant medicine in our mind, in our body, plant medicine has a way of helping us remember these frequencies. So once you've sat with these different frequencies that all these different plants offer, a remembrance happens, a door opens. And I do believe that you then have access to that frequency for forever. I don't necessarily believe you have to come going back and back and back. But also, that is not a bad thing. If something is helping you create happiness and understanding in your life, and if it's helping you remember ultimately the goal, first of all, that you are the medicine, that you are sovereign, and that also that this life is meant to be lived here on earth. That is so essential. That is so essential and so important. So when I finished my ceremony, it was great, beautiful, powerful. Jeff and I obviously were still in the rocks, and it was during the pandemic, and we had decided to spend the summer on my parents' ranch in Kauai. And we were there just trying to figure out our life, and we were quarantined there. And I got an email from the shamans that I had sat with, and they asked in the email that talked about this Dieta. Now, remember, I had no idea what any of this was. But essentially a Dieta is a relationship you go into with a plant. And it's a retreat of sorts. So it's like 1 to 2 weeks you go to the jungle by yourself with the assistance of these shamans, and you remove everything, every other relationship out of your life. You remove everything else out of your life other than this particular relationship with the plant. And I had reached out to the shamans and just said, this is what I'm dealing with in my life. This is kind of what I'm feeling. This is what I'm trying to heal and discover. And they suggested a tobacco dieta. And it was really extremely powerful. One, because I was able to remove the false education around, or the false beliefs that I had around tobacco and what the world had demonized it as, even though it's one of the most pure, powerful, ancient medicines on this earth. And two, it helped me. It was one of the most healing things I had ever done. And also one of the hardest things I had ever done. So they live in Hawaii on a different island. So I ended up going over there for a week. I could only do a week at that time. My kids were still small, and I just felt like that was really the first time I had given my phone away for an entire week. I literally handed it to her and I said, I don't even want it in my area. And up until then, I had been really into this hustle culture of maybe a couple days I would get off of it if I was backpacking in the middle of nowhere. But other than that, I was consistently on my phone. I just had like such an attachment to it. So I gave away my phone for a week, and I entered into this relationship with this plant. And, you know, the diet is really, really strict. Only like very bland vegetables, no salts, no spices. I couldn't look or touch or talk to anybody. And I drank this really sacred special tobacco tea every morning. And I had to drink the whole thing, and then I had to purge it within like 15 minutes to an hour. And then I was left alone with my thoughts and who I was. And I was able to read some books and go on walks. I couldn't go into the ocean because that was another relationship that was like a connection, right? And it had salt and all those things. So I couldn't use any like facial products or hair products or anything like that. And it was extremely powerful, and it gave me a lot of perspective. And in that ceremony, or in that retreat, you sat with grandmother almost every other day. So I was supposed to sit 3 times. I only sat twice because I ended up leaving early because there was a hurricane that was supposed to come. It was like this whole thing. I'll get to that in a second. But my first ceremony, it was really scary. Now remember my very first ceremony, which had just been June 22nd, 2020, which was, I guess, almost exactly a month to the time I did this dieta, was with like 80 people, right? This one was very different. There was like maybe 6 in the ceremony, 6 people, and it was in the jungle. And I just remember feeling really scared. It was really scary. And also it was really, really, really powerful. The shaman started out the ceremony with this, I'll never forget it. I remember feeling frustrated that I was even there in the first place. Like, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do these extreme things to feel like I'm whole or healing or understand who I was? But also gratitude that I was willing to go to the depths to understand, and also gratitude to these medicines, and also gratitude to these lineages. These specific shamans were through a lineage of Maestro Manuel, who I now am a part of as well. I learned from him almost every Saturday through the Initiatic College. Very, very powerful lineage. And I'm just so grateful for him. I'm so grateful for his lineage. So I just want to make sure that I give him the recognition and make sure I really specify and talk about these different lineages. And I'll go into 2 other different lineages. One is a Colombian lineage and one is a Native American lineage that I've also learned from. And I've gotten blessings from to, obviously I don't serve the medicine, but to talk about the medicine and to help bring the medicine to my community. So Maestro Manuel is also from the Taino tribe. I'm sorry if I botched that. It's Taino tribe. And I'm really, really grateful for his teachings that have continued in my life. But this specific shaman, I'll never forget it. I was sitting at the top of my mat and I was really nervous. And he started out with this whistling song. And it was the most powerful, profound song. You know, sound is, I mentioned before how powerful sound is a part of these ceremonies. And it's really unlocked me and my singing abilities and my desire to help heal through sound. And I just held my chest and I was sitting cross-legged at the top of my mat and I just bawled and bawled and bawled. And that really unlocked an incredibly powerful ceremony for me. So this ceremony specifically, I don't remember my intention. I think if I look back in my journals, I could tell you exactly what my intention is, but I assume it was something to do with self-love because the ceremony was so profound, surrounding self-love. I dropped in pretty quick to the medicine and I remember feeling the feeling of like fear and scary, like this feels scary, like I'm in the middle of nowhere. Everything's heightened. All of your senses are heightened in the medicine. So it was like the crickets were just right there, like in this temple. And we were in this temple that was like completely netted. And I remember there was centipedes all over the temple and they were biting some people. And I just thought, oh my gosh. So all I had with me, by the way, too, it's not like I had this whole altar set up and all these things. Like I was in Hawaii and I had a duffel bag. So I didn't even have anything. All I had from the ceremony, all I had that had brought with me to help either ground me or that meant something to me. Because in these ceremonies, a lot of people set up all these different altars, which I'm sure I'll go into the power of altars and the power of things that you can bring in to help ground you and help you remember your intention or help you move through things. But all I had was this bag of like maybe 10 very small crystals that I had carried around with me in my purse. And I remember not wanting the centipedes to bite me because they were so long and so scary. So I put like a crystal grid around my mat and I didn't get bit. And actually the crystal grid helped so much for other things too, I'll share later. But I remember the feeling of fear kind of carrying through the ceremony because what happened is it was so wild, but grandmother ayahuasca was showing me what I had allowed in my body, beliefs that I had allowed in my body, hateful things I had said. It was a incredibly deep, powerful, difficult ceremony all around self-love. So I remember I had it was really interesting for me. There was so much past life that came through after this. For me, usually what happens is I'm all over the place. Usually what happens for me is initially like the first couple gates that we're sitting in, the first couple, I would say maybe the first hour that I've really dropped in, it's about like moving through things, processing things, letting things go. And then it's really like the clarity comes in, the celebration at the end. This is different for every ceremony, but for the first handful of ceremonies, that's kind of what it happened. So I remember I started to notice almost like cartoon-like creepy things, like frogs with like teeth that were like dripping like goo, and worms and slugs and all these different things. As I've been integrating this also, because this has been now almost 4 years, it's interesting how I believe these medicines show us what our minds have believed, because nothing's outside of us, right? So that's why it's so interesting when people are like, well, what is it? Like when people Google it and they're like, well, I don't want to do this. This sounds scary. It's like birth. Like nobody's experience is going to be the same because nobody's mind is the same. And so I really believe these incredibly knowledgeable technological plants, right, have a way of communicating with you what it looks like to you, what fear looks like to you, what shame looks like to you, what false beliefs look like to you, what things look like to you inside of your body. And so for some reason, the grandmother ayahuasca knew that like she could explain to me that false beliefs or shame or guilt or fear looked like these creepy cartoon-like creatures. Because really, they're not scary, but it was a way of her to say, hey, you have this inside of you and you've allowed this to be inside you, and now it's time for you to remove this. So anytime I feel scared or nervous that she's showing me something, she cannot create anything. She, as in like the energy of, obviously I'm specifically talking about grandmother ayahuasca, but any plant medicine cannot create something that is not already in your vessel, which is such a relief, because I think so many people, me included, think that things can be created. Or, you know, like my very first fear of my first ceremony where I thought like spirits and stuff could come and possess my body. Nothing can be created, only amplified, So when I realized that I actually didn't drop in that truth, she has been showing me that many times for many ceremonies, but that really didn't drop in until literally this last year. When I realized I had nothing to fear, because she was just showing me things that I had allowed in that now get to be removed. We're going into like deep teachings today. I wasn't expecting that, but even this idea of entities, entities are nothing but thought forms that you've literally given so much power to that they now rule your life. That is one belief I believe. That I also believe, of course, there's outside energies that have the opportunity to come into your body, but only if you allow it. I really believe we have sovereignty over literally everything. And yet if we're not aware of it and we allow ourselves to get to a frequency or a vibration of negativity, that is allowing us to be susceptible to these, not just thought forms, but obviously the energies around us. So I say all that because she was showing me the entities that I had allowed in, the false beliefs that I had allowed. So I truly believed them. I believed that I believed that I wasn't naturally skinny. I believed I was chubby. I believed I was this bad human. I believed that I was supposed to have guilt. I believed in sin. I believed in all these things, and I believed them so powerfully that they were affecting my physical body. And so she was able to show me, and then all of a sudden I drink this medicine, I drop in, and I see these thought forms in my body, in my physical body. And I would look down and I saw worms, snails, and frogs in like a cartoon, like with like the sharp teeth and like the little goo. I don't even know what it was, but like dripping off of them. It just was her way of showing me, this is not healthy. This is in your body. It's time for you to get it out. And so I remember thinking, oh, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this in my body anymore. And man, I wish I remembered when this tool came, because I have learned I never really had like someone sit me down and say, okay, these are all the tools if something like this happens in grandmother or in any kind of plant medicine ceremony. Like, these are the tools to help combat it. These are the tools to help move through it, because none of it is a bad thing. It's all showing you things that are ready to be removed from your body. Like, how exciting is that? It accelerates healing. It accelerates sovereignty. It accelerates the knowledge that you are like, nothing can come, nothing is outside of you. It accelerates everything we're taught, everything that I had taught before this in my Ultimate Self-Love series, in my self-love courses, in everything that I was teaching online. It was that. It was literally, I think that's why I felt so called to plant medicine, why I still do, and why I have created containers with it now, because it's nothing but an elevated understanding and awakening of your own self-love. It's literally just the tools amplified. And so for me, it was never like, oh, this is going to become an addiction, especially to grandmother, because it is so much work to prepare for these ceremonies. And these ceremonies, this isn't like a walk in the park. This is work. This is powerful work. The most intense feelings I've ever felt, and also the most intense feelings of euphoria as well. Incredibly powerful experience. And also, studies have shown that people with addictions literally commune with these medicines to remove their addictions. And I had addictions in the past. I have addiction in my family. It runs in my family. I literally took a test. I can't remember which one it was, but it was a blood test talking about what I was allergic to and all those things. And it showed in my blood work, in my DNA, I have tendencies of addiction. I literally, like, my body metabolizes quicker and my half-life is shorter. So I have a tendency of having addiction. Anyway, so as I'm learning in all this and unlearning all this, these are the things that are dropping in. And I don't think I actually knew this specific thing I'm going to tell you next. But one really, really powerful tool that I love to use and that I teach now is the power of gratitude. And really to thank whatever it is. Oh, I remember now. I remember when that dropped in. Okay, I'm going to tell you about that story in a second, but think whatever it is that's showing up for you. Think it. And then it allows it to dissipate. So I didn't learn that until my maybe 4th or 5th ceremony. Anyway, I'm back to this ceremony. I'm in the jungle. I'm seeing these creepy cartoon like snakes and frogs that are dripping slime, and they are a physical representation of how I've been treating my body, of how I've been talking to my body, of how I felt in my body. Even with all these different tools, right? Even with all these different tools of understanding who I was and self-love and affirmations, I believe this isn't just years, this lifetime of healing. This is generational. This is me healing generations of women who, believed that they weren't whole inside themselves, or even the generations of being a part of a society who believes that you're inherently wrong or inherently bad, or that your skin is shameful, or whatever it is. So she's showing me these things, and I think, okay, it's time for me to remove them. So I'm like, I wonder what happens if I just like snap my fingers, like pull them out of my body. Because I remember thinking that was just like, I was aware enough to know that I didn't want them in my body anymore. And initially my instincts were just pull them out and dissipate them, pull it out and snap, pull it out and snap. So I just remember going through all of my body. First it was in my forehead. And I like believed the attachment was to Botox, which that's a whole other topic because I'm not necessarily against Botox, but it was just interesting how that perspective of grandmother and who I was back then and what I was trying to mask and why I was doing Botox. I believe that the intention behind it was the reason why she was showing me that it was something that was, it was just the thought form behind why I had Botox back then. So I was pulling all of these worms out of my forehead and just like dissipating them and snapping them. And then I'd pull all these different things off of my arms and all these different worms and all these different frogs. And, I was sitting cross-legged, and I remember looking at I never liked my ankles up until this point. I was like, I hate my ankles. They're the worst ankles. And they looked so gross. They had just like these gross creatures all over them. And I was like, oh my God, no wonder they look like this, because I keep telling them that they look like this. Like, my poor body is trying so hard to house me. My poor body is trying so hard to love me. And all I can do is just criticize it. As much as I'm trying so hard to love it. And at that point, I had loved it more than I'd ever in my life, but I still had so far to go. And as I was, you know, this journey is so intense, especially when you're deconditioning from beliefs that you were told to believe, right? There's just so many layers. So I'm like pulling all of these creatures from my ankles. And then as I finish pulling all of these creatures, my skin and my body starts to open up. But not in a scary way. It was actually in a really beautiful way. And it was like, you know, I said this before, like the 3D isn't real in the medicine, the 5D is real. So the concept of flesh is so different. It's so multidimensional. And so it opened up and there was soil, and my legs opened up and there was soil all on my legs, and there was soil on my body, and there was soil on my arms, and there was soil in my chest. And I remember hearing, it's time to plant new seeds. It's time to plant new seeds of love, because I just sat there sitting with my ankles feeling so sad. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I treated you like this. I'm so sorry you feel this way. I'm so sorry that I've said these things about you. Because there's a part of me, I think, that believed at that point that I didn't want to force myself to believe that I loved every part of myself if that wasn't really true, which is interesting because when you think about the science behind affirmations, a lot of it is reprogramming. And I mean, that's one of the biggest things about plant medicine is healing these neural pathways and literally reprogramming them. And, you know, when our brains have these deep grooves of pathways, these deep grooves, almost like the grooves for pivots for water irrigation in fields. Do you know what I'm talking about? How like water irrigation pivots have like these deep grooves in the fields. That's all we know. That's like our thought forms immediately go to those pathways. The cool thing about medicine is it fills in those pathways. It fills in the dirt so that you can make your own new pathways. So I start planting new seeds. And as you can imagine, all these seeds are seeds of love. I love you. You're perfect. Thank you so much for carrying me. Thank you so much for holding me. It was extremely profound. And then I would plant them, and my tears, I was crying, so my tears were watering them. It was this whole thing. It was so beautiful. And the year before this, with all this happening, remember, I was in the middle of potential divorce, a lawsuit. My best friend Kim passed, and then I also lost, I had a huge friend breakup that was really devastating. And up until that point, this friend of mine was probably at that point the one friend that showed me more love than any. And so when it broke off, it was really sad to me. It was like, that was another thing I was grieving in this Dieta. Like, how do I move on from this when I feel like the love is gone? And one thing that was really profound during this experience was that I was planting these new seeds of love, and this friend had shown me this ability to love in such a powerful, deep way that I had never experienced before. And that never goes away, even if the friend leaves, right? Or even if it's not a friend in your experience, if it's like a relationship or whoever it is, that new essence, that new feeling of frequency of love will always be there. And so I was planting this idea. It dropped in so clearly, like nothing's gone. Nothing's gone. This new thought form and this new layer of love was right there. So I started planting all these different seeds and all these different things. And I'd close up my skin and I'd cry on it, and it would bloom. And like I said, so I'm closing up my skin, but I can see through my skin, okay? So I'm looking at my muscles and I'm looking at my bones, and all of a sudden, all of these woodland creatures, I just want you to close your eyes and imagine, if you can imagine this, because it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. All these woodland creatures started to like peeking behind peeking out from behind like my muscles and my bones. It's like little deer and little squirrels. All these like trees started growing out from like my muscles and my bones. And I remember thinking, like exhaling and like just gasping and thinking, now they feel safe. They feel safe. These woodland creatures, what did they represent? I don't know. Like the free flowing beauty of my blood, the free flowing beauty of my cells, the energy behind which I was sharing and feeling with my body. For whatever reason, the medicine decided to show me them in the terms of like these woodland creatures peeking out. Like, are we safe now? Is it safe for us to be seen? Is it safe for us to be loved? Is it safe for us to live in this body, in this beautiful cosmic meat suit that we have combined our own cells, trillions and trillions of cells unique to just you amongst billions of other people? Are you safe? Are we safe to finally show ourselves? Are we safe to finally be ourselves? Are we safe to finally love ourselves? And when I saw that, I think she showed me, I think the medicine showed me that, because I'm so, like we all are, we're so quick to love other things, especially if they're like small and fuzzy and cute. So to be able to see these beautiful woodland creatures and be like, that's me, I am that, they are me, come out. And then all of a sudden, this crystal clear, glistening water, sparkly water started coming out. And it was as if you can imagine like a fantasy novel in the woods, the most perfect wooded area with crystal clear running water and trees of all different kinds and willows dripping down to the ground and all of these beautiful flowers and beautiful birds and creatures. And then unicorns started showing up, these white unicorns, which actually came a part of my ceremony, in like 2 nights. And I realized I was the reason why my body wasn't blooming. I was the only reason, not something someone said to me when I was 11, not something someone believed, not a hateful comment, not something that my parents said to me, not something that my siblings said to me, nothing, no one other than me. All it took was for me to believe in the power of the beauty of my body. And so I was just, casually planting a garden in all of my body. And I started, at my ankles and my toes, and I had all this beautiful foliage and all this beautiful, incredible garden. And it was extremely emotional and powerful for me. And I remember just going through every part of my body. And then I got to my heart, and my heart was really empty. And I remember grieving and crying and feeling sad that my heart felt empty. Because at that point it really did. I am excited again to have a conversation with Jeff. I think we're actually going to record it tomorrow. Because him and I just weren't good at filling, I don't think we were really great at filling each other's love tanks the way that we knew how. We literally didn't know. We were just babies that got married and trying to figure out life. And also I was looking for other people to fill my heart. I was looking for other people. There was a big part of my ceremony that night where I fell into victimhood. I was like, oh, my heart is empty. No one loves me, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm realizing, Sadie, what did you just do to the rest of your body? You have a choice. You can fill it with soil. You can fill it with foliage. You can fill it with whatever you want. You have the power. So I took time with my heart to fill it with soil and literally just anything I thought possible, anything I could imagine that I wanted in my heart. And that was actually where if any of you have taken my course, my Ascension course, which is like my 7-week chakra energy center course, every single week we focus on a different chakra. And at the end of the week, there is like a sound bath, meditation, breath work, really a beautiful somatic embodiment with each. And for the heart chakra, there's a beautiful meditation on grief and heart walls. And this is where that meditation dropped in, because not only was I planting what I wanted in my garden as far as woodland creatures and, vegetables and fruits and flowers, but I was also planting people in my life that had left. I was planting Kim in my garden. It's an incredibly powerful meditation, one which maybe I'll link down here. I think it's also in the app. I'll have to look and see how you guys can access it, because grief is one thing that's really difficult to process, one that will continue to be with you for forever. I don't think there will ever come a time in our lives, for those of us who have lost loved ones, when we won't miss their physical bodies. I think that void will always be there. However, there are tools that we have, an energetic embodiment and energetic practices that we can do to help us feel like they're never gone. And one of those is to plant them in our hearts and have them live in the garden of our hearts for forever. And anytime we miss them or feel them or want to feel them, we can go into a meditative state and go into the garden of our hearts and feel them there. And that's just an extension of them being our angels and guides. I really believe, once somebody leaves their physical body, our souls are infinite. And so I also believe that there could be overlapping timelines of where our souls are living and what our souls are doing. So when they leave our physical body, yes, we don't feel them in the physical form of where their bodies were, but we feel them in the metaphysical form, in the spiritual form, inside ourselves and outside ourselves, through angels and guides, through calling upon them, and also in our hearts. So needless to say, it was an extremely powerful ceremony. And something I really needed, a really big piece of me that I needed to fulfill and feel, and grieve a lot of things. My Dieta was so powerful too with my relationship with Jeff, because ultimately I had a choice. In my Dieta is really where I prophetically learned this idea of truth, trust, and transparency. And up until that point, I think I had felt so scared to live my truth amongst Jeff, because quite frankly, I didn't really know what it was. I was still trying to discover it and find it for myself. And the more I leaned into understanding who I was, the more I leaned into trusting the desires of my heart, even trusting the fact that I wanted to go to the jungle and experience this Dieta, and know that there was nothing shameful about that. I didn't have any guilt to deal with that. The more I really stood in the ground of who I was, the more confident I was in being honest with being honest with what I shared with Jeff, being honest with things I didn't have to hide. Another thing that was really powerful about the time that I took is it really helped me reflect on what was my truth. What was I not transparent about? Because I think that we start to spiral really deeply in the idea that we have to hide things. And that just perpetuates more hiding. And although we are sovereign beings, when we dedicate ourselves to a divine union, when we dedicate ourselves to a connection with a spouse, we choose into being transparent with them, even if our truth is different. And one thing I really appreciated with Jeff, when all this went down and I told him that I was wanting to commune with this medicine, or I wanted to do this Dieta, he was always really supportive. I think he felt the intensity of the need. And I also think he, first of all, knew he couldn't say no to me. And second of all, knew that there was nothing left. Like it was either this or divorce. And so much of what I was trying to understand about myself, I had kept hidden, which I feel, manifested in my ceremonies. I feel like the frequency of the medicine could tell that I wasn't being true to myself. I think the frequency of the medicine could tell, I don't believe you can really hide anything from plant medicine. And I don't say that in a scary way. I say that in the most liberating, powerful way, because she helps you understand what you've been hiding. She helps you understand how to truly be who you are. And never in any of those moments did I want to leave Jeff. In fact, as I continue this journey, I always knew it was supposed to be Jeff, which is why I think I fought so hard for him. And another thing I learned in this diet, I mean, there was just so many lessons, but I realized my lack of boundaries because of my lack of my own truth. Like, if you cannot be honest with yourself of who you are, or at least be honest that you're trying to learn who you are, because within this transparency, I was also lying to myself. I was absolutely throwing up a facade of this is me, because I was trying so hard to be so confident in who I was when really I had no idea. But I was not confident enough to say I didn't know, because I was trying to show the facade that I knew, because I didn't want people to judge me. Did you follow that? So because of that, I was in this state of almost like prideful ignorance where nothing could get through, not even my real truth. And as I realized that, and as I realized how much I lacked integrity for my marriage and also for myself, things began to unwind. And one of those really powerful things was my lack of boundaries, it was crazy to see all of these realizations. You know, when you remove all of these extra noises, even the things you put into your body, everything is just noise and energy. And so when I was able to remove all that, I was able to see, whoa, I had lack of boundaries in my business because I didn't believe in myself. And so because of that, I allowed this lawsuit to happen because I didn't stand up for who I was. And that's the same as my marriage. I didn't stand up for who I was because I didn't know who I was, but how was I supposed to stand up for myself? But I was hiding behind the facade that I knew, which is just pushing Jeff away from me more, and ultimately pushing myself away from me more. And one thing I realized is a really powerful gift that I have, which is that I'm able to see other people's higher selves. And because of that gift, little did I know, I was letting people in because I thought that the higher self that I saw was the person that they were. Little did I know it wasn't. And so I would let people in seeing their best intentions. I would let people in seeing their most powerful, sovereign, expressed self, which I realized that week that that's what I saw in Jeff when I first married him. And that's why, in a lot of ways, I take accountability for being too hard on him, because he didn't even know what he was missing. And I was seeing things that he didn't see, and I was holding him way too high of a standard. And not like I think that that's wrong, because I definitely think that you should have standards. But Jeff didn't know what he didn't know. He didn't know what he wasn't able to comprehend. And I did that because of my lack of boundaries. So a lot of things happened that week. One, I became more sovereign and powerful in myself, and and stood in the power of myself, in my own truth and trusting my own truth and my own transparency within myself. That started with me. And then everything rippled out, right? Rippled out to, I'm not going to let this lawsuit win because I know my own truth, right? To, I choose Jeff because I do have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Within any relationship, you can choose to say yes, you can choose to say no, you can choose to trust that it'll work, and then you can choose to direct your attention elsewhere. I learned later that just because I choose that doesn't mean the other person chooses that. Both people have to have accountability, which we'll go into that later. But it was just this aha moment, this deeper understanding of, I get to choose what I believe in myself. I really, in the most finite way, get to believe that. And then that holds me at a higher frequency. And from that higher frequency, from that accountability piece, that is where boundaries begin. Because if people aren't going to meet me up here, I'm not meeting them down here. I'm staying up here in my own truth and transparency, with the caveat of always learning, always having enlightenment, always questioning. The term enlightenment, one definition for it is always questioning. I always want to be a humble student to this life, school that we're in. Also, while realizing that I have infinite worth, and never again will I forget it. Never again will I forget that infinite worth. So it was very powerful for me. I remember I got to call Jeff a little early because of the hurricane, and the shamans had been in contact with him throughout the week, so he wasn't like completely in the dark. But I had a moment in my ceremony where I knew I was going to choose him, and I was going to fight for this, and I was going to give my 100%. I didn't know if he was going to, but I was going to. And I got to call him, and I'll never forget his voice. And I just bawled, and I just said, I choose you. I love you. Thank you for everything. And I'm sorry. And we were both apologizing and all these beautiful things. And we arranged me to go home early. And before I left, I ended my Dieta with a Hape ceremony. So initially it was supposed to be a grandmother ceremony, but I had to leave early. So I had to finish my Dieta early. And Hape is an incredibly powerful sacred snuff that you blow up your nose in a ceremonial way. And it's mixed with all sorts of different herbs, depending on what tribe you get it from is dependent on what it has. There's some that have tobacco. There's some that have rose. There's some that have all sorts of different kinds of medicinal things in them. Very, very powerful. My first experience with it was really not great. I had just broke my Dieta, so I had some salt, and or maybe I didn't have salt that time, but I just had eaten a lot of food. And we go into the temple, and the person that was serving me, which was one of the helpers, used this what is it called? I can't think of the name for it now. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe I'm forgetting this. But essentially it was use a pipe kind of thing to blow it up the person's nose when you're being served. But this one had 2 holes, so it went in my nose at the same time. And it was so intense, and my whole body broke out in sweats, and I threw up. That's not usually how your first time goes. But it was very, very, very powerful, and it was very symbolic of, the last bit of cleansing I needed to do before I left. And then I got on the plane, and because of the intensity, this is just like a side note, an interesting part of my journey, because at that point, it was kind of in the height of the pandemic. So everything was closed, and I had just had a duffel bag, and I hadn't showered. I hadn't used any soaps. Like I literally looked rough, and I had to travel. I had 2 18-hour layovers, 2 of them, one in Honolulu. And then I just slept on the floor of the airport. And at that point, everything was closed in the airports because of the pandemic. And I was still having to be really mindful of slowly adding in salts and stuff. And I went to Starbucks and got a breakfast sandwich, and I ate that so slow and so good. It was so good. And I just remember sleeping on the floor of the airport thinking, oh my gosh, just get me home to my babies. I'm over this. I'm done. I've learned my lesson. Let's go. And after 40 hours of travel, I got home and just slept with my babies in my bed and started my journey back to myself, choosing Jeff, choosing me. The next part is the next cool part is, it's cool now. It was really painful when it happened, but my integration the next week was very intense. We'll finish that. Let's just finish there since we're at an hour, and I'll come back and talk about my integration on the Salmon River and what happened there. I hope you do something today that makes you feel wild, that helps you come back to the wild within you. I love you so much. I will see you soon.